Helen Mirren, the name itself evokes elegance, power, and timeless beauty. For decades, she has been one of the most respected actresses in the world, commanding every stage and screen she graced. From her groundbreaking performances with the Royal Shakespeare Company to her Oscar-winning portrayal of Queen Elizabeth II, Mirren built a career defined by excellence and authenticity. But behind that royal poise lies a story few truly know, one marked by deep pain, quiet losses, and a strength forged in tragedy. At 80, Helen Mirren remains the embodiment of grace. But her journey to this point has been anything but easy. She has faced heartbreaks that would break most people, personal grief, private struggles, and an emotional burden that fame could never ease. Despite the applause, the awards, and the admiration of millions, Helen's life has been shadowed by the kind of sorrow she rarely speaks about in public. Friends describe her as stoic but scarred, a woman who hides her sadness behind wit and wisdom. Her radiant smile conceals years of inner conflict, from her complicated relationships to devastating family losses that changed her forever. And while she's become a symbol of strength for generations of women, those who know her best say that Helen's heart still carries wounds from the past. Today, as she reflects on her life and legacy, Helen Mirren's story is not just one of triumph, but of endurance. The world sees the legend, but behind the legend lies a woman who's loved deeply, lost painfully, and somehow found the courage to keep shining. Helen Lydia Mirenoff was born on July 26, 1945, in London, just weeks after the end of World War II, a time when Britain was rebuilding itself from ashes. Her father, Vasily Mironov, was a Russian immigrant who had changed his name to Basil Mirren to sound more English. Her mother, Kathleen Rogers, came from a working-class English family with deep roots in London. The Mirrens were far from wealthy, but what they lacked in money, they made up for in pride and perseverance. From an early age, Helen was a dreamer. While other children played in the streets, she would lose herself in stories and imagination. She once said, "I lived in a world that was half real and half fantasy. Acting just gave that fantasy a stage." But even as a young girl, Helen faced the kind of discouragement that could have easily ended her ambitions. Her parents hoped she'd become a teacher, something safe and respectable. Acting in their eyes was uncertain, even scandalous. Yet destiny had other plans. At age 13, Helen saw a production of Hamlet at London's Old Vic Theatre. The power of Shakespeare's words, the intensity of the performance, it struck something deep inside her. That night, she decided she would spend her life performing. Against her parents' wishes, Helen auditioned for the National Youth Theatre, and her raw talent was impossible to ignore. By 18, she was already being recognized as one of Britain's most promising young actresses. Her early years were far from glamorous. Helen often performed for little or no pay, traveling with small theatre troupes across England. But her fierce determination and striking presence soon earned her a reputation as a daring performer, unafraid to take risks. When she joined the Royal Shakespeare Company in the late 1960s, critics described her as electric and dangerous and utterly hypnotic. She played strong, sensual women, Cleopatra, Lady Macbeth, and other roles that challenged the limits of femininity in theatre. Still, fame didn't come easily. The press fixated on her beauty rather than her skill, branding her the sex queen of Stratford. It was a label she despised. "I wanted to be known for my craft," she once said, "not my curves." The constant scrutiny hurt her deeply, but she refused to let it define her. Instead, Helen fought back, through her work. She poured her frustration into her performances, channeling her defiance into every role she played. By the 1970s, she had transitioned into film, taking on daring and often controversial projects. Movies like Caligula and The Long Good Friday showcased her range, but also drew criticism for their boldness. Many didn't understand her choices, but Helen never cared for approval. "I've always been drawn to danger, emotional, artistic, or otherwise," she once said with a wry smile. Behind the confidence, however, Helen carried a quiet loneliness. While her career flourished, her personal life often left her unfulfilled. She had relationships with fellow actors and artists, but her restless spirit made lasting love difficult. "I was too busy chasing truth on stage to find it in life," she admitted years later. Her breakthrough came in 2006, when she portrayed Queen Elizabeth II in The Queen. The performance was mesmerizing, restrained yet deeply human. It earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress and solidified her as one of the greatest performers of her generation. Ironically, the woman once dismissed as too rebellious had become the ultimate symbol of grace and dignity. But behind that Oscar smile, Helen's heart carried decades of exhaustion and private grief. Her journey from a post-war childhood to international stardom had taken everything from her. Her youth, her innocence, and in some ways her peace. Still, when asked if she would change anything, Helen simply replied, "Not a thing, because every scar has made me who I am." She had fought her battles quietly, conquered them fiercely, and emerged as a legend. But the world had yet to see the sorrow behind her triumph. Behind Helen Mirren's poised smile and commanding stage presence lay a story far more fragile, one built on heartbreak, solitude, and the kind of emotional sacrifice that only fame can demand. Throughout her life, Helen was known for her independence. She never fit neatly into Hollywood's expectations of a glamorous leading lady. She didn't chase the red carpets, nor did she obsess over appearances. But that same fierce independence came with a price: loneliness. "I've always loved deeply," she once confessed, "but I've also been afraid of losing myself in someone else." Her early romances were with men who shared her passion for the arts, but rarely her resilience. Many relationships ended in quiet heartbreak. Some couldn't handle her success. Others tried to mold her into something she wasn't. "People think strong women are unbreakable," she said in one interview. "But the truth is, we just learned to break privately." In the 1970s, while building her name in British theatre, Helen often found herself torn between love and ambition. She yearned for connection but feared commitment would cost her career. Her rising fame came at a time when women in Hollywood were still expected to be submissive and charming, traits Helen refused to adopt. "I didn't want to be anyone's muse," she said. "I wanted to be the artist." It wasn't until the 1980s that her life took an unexpected turn. While filming Excalibur, she met American director Taylor Hackford. Their connection was instant, but not without complications. Hackford was still recovering from a previous marriage, and Helen had long sworn off the idea of being tied down. Yet, something about him felt different, steady, grounded, and deeply respectful of her individuality. Still, their love story was far from easy. For years, they maintained a long-distance relationship, each consumed by demanding careers. Helen later admitted that she nearly walked away several times, afraid that their lives were simply too different. But Hackford was patient. He didn't chase her or demand her time. He waited. "He understood that I belonged to my work," Helen said softly. "And somehow, that made me want to belong to him." They finally married in 1997, after more than a decade together, a decision that stunned many who thought she would never settle down. Helen laughed off the curiosity, saying, "Marriage isn't a fairy tale. It's a truce between two dreamers." Despite their love, tragedy found its way into Helen's life. She and Taylor never had children, a choice that was both intentional and painful. In her 40s, she realized she would never experience motherhood. Though she often claimed she had no regrets, she admitted in quieter moments that the decision left a lingering ache. "There's a kind of silence that comes from not having children," she once said. "You feel it most when the applause stops." Helen poured her emotions into her work. Every heartbreak, every missed chance for a family, every lonely night became fuel for her performances. Her roles grew deeper, more human, as if each one revealed another piece of her soul. From Gosford Park to The Queen, audiences felt her authenticity. It wasn't just acting, it was confession through art. But even as her fame reached new heights, Helen faced harsh criticism from those who couldn't understand her choices. She was accused of being cold, aloof, even unfeminine. The tabloids painted her as a woman too proud for love, too ambitious for happiness. Yet those closest to her knew the truth. Behind the elegance was a heart that had simply learned to protect itself. As the years passed, Helen found peace not in fame, but in simplicity, tending her garden, cooking, and enjoying quiet evenings with her husband. Still, every so often, she would speak of the past with a wistful tone, as if haunted by the ghosts of what might have been. "I've had great loves and terrible heartbreaks," she said. "But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that loneliness isn't a punishment. It's a companion that teaches you who you really are." Her words carried the weight of someone who had lived fully and lost quietly, a woman who gave the world everything and in return asked only to be understood. As Helen Mirren's career soared to extraordinary heights, the world saw her as an icon of confidence, a woman who defied age, beauty standards, and Hollywood stereotypes. But beneath that radiant exterior, she carried invisible scars, the kind fame could neither erase nor heal. From the very beginning, Helen struggled with the expectations placed upon her. When she joined the Royal Shakespeare Company in her 20s, she was labelled the Sex Queen of Stratford. The title was meant to celebrate her sensuality, but instead, it trapped her in a box. Critics focused more on her looks than her performances, and tabloids reduced her to a symbol rather than an artist. "I was young, passionate, and fearless," Helen recalled, "but they made it sound like a crime." This early objectification left a deep mark. While her male co-stars were praised for their talent, Helen had to fight twice as hard to be taken seriously. "People thought I was difficult," she once admitted, "but all I ever wanted was to be respected." That desire for respect would drive much of her life and cost her dearly. Hollywood wasn't kind to women who aged, and Helen knew it. The film industry's obsession with youth often pushed actresses aside once they reached their 40s. But she refused to fade quietly. Instead, she reinvented herself, taking on roles that showcased her intellect and emotional depth. Movies like Prime Suspect and The Queen transformed her from a sex symbol into one of the most revered performers of her generation. Yet behind each triumph was exhaustion, the kind that comes from constantly having to prove your worth. Fame also came with loneliness. Despite her enduring partnership with Taylor Hackford, Helen often described her life as a series of hotel rooms and early morning flights. The demands of stardom left little time for rest or reflection. "I lived out of suitcases for years," she said. "Sometimes I'd wake up and forget what city I was in." Then there was the toll of public scrutiny. Every wrinkle, every comment, every wardrobe choice was analyzed and judged. In her 60s, when most actors would have retired, Helen became a global sensation again, praised for her beauty and grace, but still objectified. "They call it a compliment when they say I look good for my age," she once said with a sigh. "But what they really mean is they're surprised I haven't disappeared." Despite the adoration, Helen never felt entirely comfortable with fame. She avoided Hollywood's social circles and preferred solitude to parties. "I'm shy," she confessed. "People assume I love attention, but I actually find it overwhelming." What many didn't know was that Helen also battled with self-doubt. Even after decades of success, she often questioned whether she truly deserved her accolades. When she won the Academy Award for The Queen in 2007, her acceptance speech was graceful, but later she revealed the anxiety behind it. "I remember standing there thinking, do I really belong here?" Her fame also brought painful reminders of mortality. As Helen entered her later years, she lost many close friends and colleagues, actors and directors who had shaped her early career. Each loss chipped away at her heart. "You start to feel like you're standing in an empty theater," she said quietly. The applause fades, the lights go down, and you realize how fragile it all was. Still, Helen refused to let tragedy define her. Instead, she used her experiences to advocate for women's empowerment, body positivity, and equality in the arts. She spoke openly about the industry's double standards, challenging producers to cast older women in complex roles. Her courage gave others strength, but few knew how much pain it took to speak so boldly. "I've spent a lifetime pretending to be other people," she said in one interview. "But maybe the hardest role has been learning to be myself." Even as she aged gracefully, Helen's eyes carried the same mixture of fire and sadness, the look of someone who had fought her battles quietly and won them at a cost. Fame had given her everything she dreamed of: recognition, influence, legacy. But it had also taken parts of her she could never get back. Still, when asked if she would change anything, Helen smiled softly and replied, "No, every scar is a story. And I've lived enough for 1,000 of them." At 80, Helen Mirren stands as one of the last true icons of cinema, a woman who has witnessed the evolution of the film industry, endured its cruelties, and emerged with her dignity intact. She has lived a life that few could imagine. Glamorous, yes, but also lonely, disciplined, and deeply introspective. In her later years, Helen has spoken more openly about what it all truly meant: the fame, the applause, the sacrifices, and the personal costs that came with being Helen Mirren. Her mornings are quieter now. She spends more time at her home in Lake Tahoe with her husband, director Taylor Hackford. The couple enjoys long walks by the water, evenings filled with laughter and wine, and moments of reflection. "It's funny," she once said. "You spend your whole life chasing success, only to realize that peace was what you were looking for all along. But that peace didn't come easily." Helen's journey has been marked by loss, the death of loved ones, the fading of friendships, and the slow acceptance of aging. "You think you'll always be young," she said in a candid interview. "Then one day, you look in the mirror, and the girl you were is gone. But if you're lucky, the woman who's left has learned something about grace." Despite her elegance, Helen has never shied away from brutal honesty. She's spoken about regret, about roles she turned down, people she hurt unintentionally, and times she doubted her own worth. But she's also learned forgiveness, of others and of herself. "You can't live a long life without making mistakes," she said softly. "What matters is that you don't let them define you." Even now, Helen continues to act, though her choices are guided more by heart than ambition. She picks roles that challenge her soul, characters who are flawed, complicated, and real. "I'm not interested in perfection," she explained. "I'm interested in truth." It's this pursuit of truth that has kept her relevant long after many of her contemporaries faded from the spotlight. But her reflections go beyond film. Helen has often spoken about society's obsession with youth and beauty. "There's a cruelty to the way the world treats aging women," she said. "But I decided long ago not to fight it, to wear my years proudly." Her silver hair, once dyed for roles, has become her signature, symbolizing defiance and acceptance all at once. "Every wrinkle," she smiled, "is just a laugh I've already had." In interviews, Helen sometimes speaks of her younger self, the fiery, fearless woman who rebelled against rules and expectations. "I wish I could tell that girl to relax," she chuckled. "She didn't know she'd make it. She was so afraid of being forgotten." But the irony is that Helen Mirren will never be forgotten. Her legacy is carved into film history, her voice immortalized in performances that moved millions. Yet, when asked about her proudest accomplishment, she doesn't mention the Oscars, the Emmys, or the Golden Globes. Instead, she says, "It's the people I've loved, the kindness I've given, and the calm I've found." That's the real reward. Still, traces of melancholy linger in her words. "Fame fades, beauty fades, but stories remain," she said in one of her most poignant reflections. "And I've been lucky to live many." Today, when fans see Helen Mirren, her regal posture, her warm smile, her unflinching gaze, they see strength. But those closest to her know that beneath it lies a heart that's weathered storms most will never know. Her story is not one of tragedy alone, but of transcendence, of a woman who turned pain into art and art into meaning. As she looks toward the twilight of her remarkable life, Helen leaves behind not just a legacy of brilliance, but a reminder to us all that beauty is temporary, but authenticity endures forever. And as she once said, in a rare moment of vulnerability, "If this is the final act, I hope it's a kind one. Because after all, I've played every role I could, except peace. And now maybe I'm ready for that too."